Welcome to Adam's Gardening Guides and to my greenhouse, where I'm going to provide a growing guide for cucumbers. These are one of my favourite greenhouse crops. I grow them alongside my tomatoes, mixing in a few plants of cucumbers and tomatoes to provide pickings through the summer. And in this video I'm going to show you how I sow and grow my cucumbers, how I train them up in the greenhouse as well, trained up into the use of the greenhouse. This side of the greenhouse facing south, so it's getting the light, how I encourage the crops to grow strongly, and also how I water and look after them using this automatic watering system with a water butt at the end of the greenhouse, which provides a constant supply of moisture to keep the crops growing strongly and allows you to go on holiday or away for a few days without the need to get someone in to look after watering of your plants. So in this video, a complete cucumber growing guide to show you how I grow my cucumbers here in my greenhouse. I sow a lot of my crops in these compressed compost pellets made from coconut fibre. They come dried and compressed, and what you've got to do is to soak them in water so that they'll expand in size and they turn into these lovely deep modules of compost that you can sow the seeds into. So all you've got to do is just put the little pellets in a tray of water of some sort. And I tend to do this the night before I want to sow the crops. Wet the top of each one just to make sure that they're a bit damp, and then fill the tray with water and leave them. If the water runs out, top it up with a little bit more water, and as I say, leave these overnight because it takes a few hours for them to swell to their full size. And when they have swollen, they expand into these nice little net covered modules of compost, and these are perfect for sowing seeds straight into. Now, cucumber seeds are quite expensive and you don't get many in a packet. There's only 4 seeds in this packet of cucumbers. So pricey seeds, we want to give them the very best start in life. And in this particular packet, the seeds themselves are in a little foil. I'm sowing Bella and a few other varieties today. Bella are a really good disease-resistant variety of cucumber. Just rip open the little pack. And inside you'll find the cucumber seeds. As they should be 4 seeds in this pack. Yeah, it's not got 1 in there, so there should be 4 seeds in this pack, so all I've got to sow. So I'm going to take them 1 seed at a time, and what I do is to make a little slit about just over 1 centimetre deep, about ½ inch deep in the top of the little module. Take the seed, they're big enough to hold singly, push it in and push it down, and then just pinch the compost around the top. And I'm going to put 1 seed in each of these little compost pots. Just make a slit in the top of the compost, pop the seed in, drop it down, poke it down to the bottom of the little trench that we'd made, cover it with compost, pinch it well. That's all I need to do. Label up your varieties. I'll keep these watered and make sure it's soaked, and then I can put this into my heated propagator to germinate, because I want the temperature to stay at night, stay around 20-21 degrees, about 65-70 degrees Fahrenheit, absolutely ideal, just to make sure you'll get really good germination. So these can be put into my heated propagator. Got the tomato plants already going here now. Keep them in here. Just check every day that the compost hasn't dried out. You can put a little bit more water in the bottom of the tray if they have, and leave these, and these will soon germinate. There you go. Do you know, it only has taken 4 weeks for the seeds to germinate and turn into these lovely little cucumber seedlings. There you go. This variety of Bella, lovely crop, and as you can see now, good growth at the top, nice well-rooted root ball here, so I can already see the roots going out through the sides of the netting that covers these jiffy pots, and these are ready for potting up individually. You'll also notice at the base of the stem of the cucumber some little roots already developing, and that means that I can plant this plug plant deeper into its finished pot to bury this little section of stem, because these roots will grow out, give a little bit more stability. So I'm now ready for potting. Choose a reasonably deep pot. This is about a 4 or 5 inch pot, so I'm going to put this right down the bottom and really try and plant it as deeply as I can in the plastic pot. Layer of compost, just a little bit of a layer right down at the bottom of the pot itself. Then take your little jiffy pot and seedling, push that in the centre. Going to remove the label for a second. Then you can fill in around this with compost. Tease it down with your fingers if you need to. Just a good layer of compost all the way around, keeping that little plug plant of roots as centrally as you possibly can. Not essential, just ease the compost down. Don't thumb too hard, but just tease it down so there's no air pockets left in there. Fill up right up to the top of the pot, because like I said before, I want to bury that bottom section of the stem that had some new roots growing, because these will grow out into the surrounding compost. Pop the label back in, and finally give the pot a little water to settle the compost, moisten the compost down, and there I've got some nice little cucumber seedlings growing on into nice plants. Once these are properly rooted, I'll better pop these up into a slightly bigger pot, and these will be ready for growing on in my greenhouse this summer. After a few weeks of initial potting, the cucumbers are growing nice and tall now, with the first signs of flowers developing in the axis of each of those leaves. What I'm going to do now, I've got a short cane in these pots, and I'm just going to give them an extra tie on. Just a loose tie around each of these plants, just to make sure they don't topple. If you don't do that, then they're not self-climbing yet. These cucumbers haven't started producing any little tendrils. So a few little ties up the stem will just make sure that they are staying nice and vertical. So just get yourself a little bit of garden string and tie these in. It's a job I try and do a couple of times a week as we move through to summer, because these plants need to be grown on till they're well rooted before I move them up to the next size pot. So there we are, nice and secure. And I'm just going to see what the root system is like on these today. So let's have a look at this one here. If you check on the underside of the pot, yes, there are a few roots coming out through the drainage holes. Shows it should have a decent root system. I just ease this pot a little bit, squeeze it around. There we go. Got some nice roots developing in here. So again, within the next couple of weeks, I'm going to pot these on into the larger size pot and grow them on, ready for keeping in the greenhouse over the summer. But for now, I'm going to keep them in these little pots, keep them well watered, and just make sure the temperature under glass doesn't get too warm for them. So when you are watering, just water the compost, don't wet the leaves, particularly at the height of a sunny summer's day, because you don't want the leaves to scorch. Continue potting on your cucumbers through the spring. I probably should have done these a couple of weeks ago, but time has caught me out. But it's now ready to move them from these 5-6 inch pots into a bigger one, and this is the pot I'm going to use in my self-watering system this summer. And in fact, because I haven't potted them up yet, they've already started producing some fruits. So I've got some tasty cucumbers which I'll probably pick now before I start potting on. And as you'll notice, all the way up the stem, you've got new flowers and fruits developing. Generous plants, which if you start them off earlier enough in the season, will start giving you some crops as we move through from late spring into early summer. Now these cucumbers are really ready for potting on, and I'm going to move it on now into this pot, which comes from my automatic watering system. It's produced by a company called AutoPot, and I'll show you later in this video how I set up these pots in the self-watering system itself. But for now, I'm going to take this pot, and what I need to do is to put a little bit of a fabric membrane in the base, and this is just to stop the roots of the cucumber from growing out into the self-watering valve. So I don't want the roots to be blocking the system, so put that in the base. A nice layer of compost in the bottom. As you can see, I've got a really nice root system developing on this cucumber, and I'm going to use the empty pot as a template, as a guide, by putting compost around this, and then I can just drop the root ball of the cucumber down into it. So adjust the height so that basically this sits about level with the new pot it's going to be in. A little bit more compost in there. What I want is for the roots of the cucumber to grow down into this lovely new compost here. So don't plant too deeply, otherwise you'll get a roots at the bottom and nothing at the top. So I want them to root down. A little bit more compost in there now. There we go. Now once that's in there, just fill in around the empty pot with more compost. There we go. Just firm it down with your fingertips as you go. Don't ram it down too tightly, because roots do need air and the compost needs to drain rather than sitting solid and waterlogged. But just easing this down with your fingertips is fine, and I just want the compost surface to be just below the rim of this outer green pot which goes into my watering system. And once the compost is firming it so it doesn't fall back in when I remove the little plastic pot, I'll just give it a twist, take that out, then I can get my cucumber in this lovely root system, and that will just sit very neatly now down in the pot itself. Just push that down, a little bit more compost on the top, round the surface there, firm that down, and now I can finish off today by watering from the top, just so that the compost will settle down around the root ball. If it sinks down too low, then you can always top up with some extra compost around it. Just water this to settle the compost. Now, I'm not going to start this pot straight in its automatic watering system. What I'm going to do is to grow it on in this container, just in a tray for a few weeks, so that the roots will grow out into this compost. And once it's really well rooted in this pot, that's when I'll move this into its final summer home in my AutoPot watering system. These cucumber bella are perfect in greenhouses because they've got a natural resistance to mildew disease, so they stay much healthier. I've grown them for a few years now. I really like this crop. I've potted them both up, so now I'm going to remove and harvest another one. So I've already got two nice little cucumbers early in the season. Lovely to be able to pick some fresh cucumbers as we move through into early summer. The other thing I'm going to do today is just check. I've got another little baby cucumber around this side that, because it's been resting on the surface of the compost, it's started to rot. So I'm going to remove that. And you'll notice on this plant that you'll get flowers in the axils of the leaves, and you might also get some little side shoots starting to form. Don't be greedy. I'll cut this out, because if you don't, then as well as the main stem, I'll suddenly get lots of these side shoots developing. I know they'll carry flowers and fruits, so it seems cruel to cut them off, but I would prefer all the energy to go into that first main stem. If you do find that you've got space in your greenhouse and you want to try, then you could let the side shoot develop, but pinch out the tip of it after about a couple of leaves, and maybe carry one extra fruit or so on the side shoot before you cut it away. But today I'm going to cut this out completely. Just follow it back to where it comes out from the leaf joint and remove that little side shoot. Don't be greedy and keep too many of those. If I move up one more leaf. I've got a little side shoot developing here as well. I can just pinch that out between my finger and thumb to stop the plant putting too much energy into producing these little side shoots. And as well as these lowest fruits, when you go up the stem, I've got a little flower and fruit developing here, another one in next leaf up, another one in the next leaf up. So if you look after your plants carefully, you can literally get one fruit in every leaf joint up the stem. Talk about generous. That's why I love growing cucumbers. You get so many homegrown fruits from just a couple of plants. And one regular job you must do is to tie the tips of your cucumbers into their supports. I know cucumbers make these lovely tendrils which will grip on and help to support the plants as they grow, but I'll just get little bits of soft string and every few inches up the stem, just very loosely, not a tight tie, just a very loose tie with some garden string, just to point the tip of the shoot in the right direction. So as you can say, it's not tight, but it's just going to guide the tip of the cucumber up the cane support. Once I get this into its final position in the greenhouse, I'll need some taller supports to take the plant right up into the eaves of the greenhouse. But for now, just every few days, just a little loose tie of string, just to make sure that the growth doesn't start flopping and it stays upright, growing into the light. As we move through into early summer, those first flowers will start setting fruits, and as you move down the plants, there's a mature cucumber. That was one of the first ones to develop, and I'll be harvesting this soon on my second cucumber plant here. I've got some nice cucumbers already forming, and as you'll notice, they've got the main stem of the cucumber and I've got a leaf coming off it. It's at that point there that you'll get the flowers developing, and that's where you start getting the fruits forming. So hopefully you're trying to get a fruit developing at every leaf node up the stem. That doesn't always happen. Sometimes you'll find, so move up here, that one didn't form, then up. I'm not sure whether that one has set yet or it's going to fall. It's difficult to tell at this stage. I'm up a little bit further. I've got another little baby cucumber just starting to develop. So you won't be successful necessarily and find that everyone sets. Sometimes the weather conditions just aren't right. You just want to make sure you try and keep the conditions in your greenhouse warm and humid, and hopefully you'll encourage a really good set of cucumbers to enjoy. I let them get to a decent size before I pick them. They'll last on the plants for quite a long period of time, swelling by the day, and be enjoying these through the months ahead. To make watering my summer greenhouse crops just that little bit easier, I'm going to set up an automatic watering system. So rather than having to water the plants every day, filling up trays, watering growing bags and so on, I'm using this system which is called an AutoPot, automatic watering system. The trays will hold 2 pots, and I've already grown my tomatoes and cucumbers in these square pots, planted them up, got them really well rooted so they're nicely established, and then now they're ready to put into these trays. Now what you have in the tray to start with is a little mat. This has got copper, I think, built into it, so it stops the roots of the crops from growing down into this little valve. So put the little mats in the bottom, and this little valve is called an aqua valve. It comes in several pieces. It's got a float inside, it's got a main unit which pushes down onto a pin in the base, and it's also got these floats. Now this aqua valve has been specially designed so that the floats allow in and cut off the water supply. So you'll put this in place. I'll connect my irrigation pipe onto this. Once it's in place, the tray will fill with water. Once it's full with water, the water supply cuts off. Basically, there's a float inside which floats up, and this pushes down this little rubber plastic seal in there, and it shuts off the water supply. So as the float lifts up, it shuts off the water supply. Then the crops will use the water, and as the water is used up, this float drops down, and once the seal around that has dried out, basically it allows more water back in. So this valve regulates the water, allowing water in, lets the crops use it up. Once the supply is gone, it adds more water. So the plants aren't sitting constantly in water. This is allowing water in and out, and it's regulated by how much water the individual crops use in each tray. Now I'm going to grow 10 plants down this sunny south-facing side of my greenhouse. South is over in this direction here. The sun will come in. Got my staging on the north side, so I'm going to put all my crops down on this side. Actually, outside I've got some trained cane fruits which do cast a little bit of shade at the bottom, but the main sun will come in the top of the greenhouse. Now I've got 10 plants, so 5 trays. I'm going to space these down. I've got an irrigation pipe which joins onto this water butt at the end. The water butt has got a little tap on it, so basically I will fill this up, and I have found that once this tank is full, it can keep the plants supplied with water for several weeks. If it's an incredibly hot summer, maybe I'll need to top the tank up once a week, but it's certainly not a daily chore. All you've got to do is literally put the hose in the top, fill it up completely. So at the moment I'm going to lay out the trays, and I'm going to lay them out so that there's a little groove in the back of each tray. That's going to be at the back so the irrigation pipe can come in. And my first job is to space these out down the length of the greenhouse. I think that's about it. Evenly spaced down the length of the greenhouse. Each tray with its weed suppressing mat in the base, a valve, and a little valve cover which I'll put on the end just to stop any debris falling down and clogging up the valve itself. And now it's just a matter of connecting the main irrigation water pipework onto each individual valve. I might need some boiling water for this part of the job because I need to just soften the plastic of the tube to make sure that it can fit neatly onto the valve. So I unscrew the connector, just put that on the individual pipe, just squeeze that through there so it's in place, back in the hot water just to soften it a bit. As I say, the pipe's going to go onto this little end bit on the valve itself. I think that's warm enough now. Let's have a look. Just see if that will push on. Yeah, that's good. Because plastic can be a bit brittle, you don't want to be bending it and pushing it and snapping it. So put the pipe on, screw up the connector so it's nice and tight, and it'll hold that firmly in place. Now there's a little indentation there that fits onto a little piece in the base of the tray, so I can push that down neatly in place. Pipework comes out at the end, so the valve moves freely. That's all nice and simple. Now to connect up the rest of them. Now if you're careful with these and you treat them with respect, at the end of the season I'll take this all to bits, wash out the trays, clean the valves completely and dry them off for the winter. But caring for it, these systems can last for years, so bit of an initial investment to buy it all, but I've probably been using this same automatic watering system here for about 20 years. And it's still got life in it. I have replaced one, I think, of the valves in the course of that time, and you can buy spares online, but otherwise they have lasted really, really well. Good investment, certainly had my money's worth out of these. Now before I put the plants into the trays. I'm going to start filling up the tank. So tank is here, just going to use my hose, stick that down to the bottom and start filling up the tank with water. As I say, this is a job you can do. Just check inside the lid every few days, see how much water has been taken. Water level will drop. Once it's down near the valve at the bottom, just top it up with water. Now, valves are in place, mats are in place, I can start putting some of my crops into the trays. Now the crops themselves are nicely rooted. Let me just grab this tomato plant. You can see how well established this is. This is a variety called Akron, already producing a nice crop. And the reason I wanted to get it established in its pot before I put it in its tray is that I don't want the compost to get waterlogged, and I always find it's best to really water by hand for a few weeks after potting, just to make sure the plants are nicely established. And then I can just check underneath, just remove any compost loosely off the bottom of that pot there, and just drop that down into its slot in the tray. Now my next job is going to be to build the system above, just to support my crops as they're growing, taking the crop vertically up and into the eaves of the greenhouse. But for now I can just put each of these crops in place, and then I can start looking at the support framework. Now, in addition to the tomatoes, I've got a couple of cucumbers too. This is a variety called Bella, which is actually already starting to produce some cucumbers. I've had a few pickings on these already, and I think it's probably even more important to make sure that your cucumbers are rooted in the pots before you put it in the system, to stop the base just sitting constantly in water. And I'm going to alternate the tomatoes from the cucumbers down the greenhouse. So I've got 3 tomatoes down. I'm now going to put this cucumber in to this tray here. It will share a tray with one of the tomatoes. Put that one in there. The water butt is now full of water, so I can remove the hose for the moment. I won't turn the valve on at the bottom at the moment. I'm just going to stick the lid on the tank. Now, what I've done is I've put some support canes right the way down the length of my greenhouse, both in the eaves here and up in the ridge. And I'm going to take another support cane from each plant up into the ridge of my greenhouse. So as the crop grows grown up, I can then take it up and it will face the sun on the south and just train the crops in. So that's what I'm going to do. The crop's going to come up and then across. So I've now got to fit these canes in place, tie them at the top and down at the bottom here to support the crops. I've got 10 of these to do. This will just give each plant its own individual cane support, and I can tie these in regularly to make sure that it holds the crop secure, especially when it's carrying a weighty crop of tomatoes or cucumbers. You really need to tie in regularly to support the stems and make sure they don't bend and break. So just take your time, tie them in one at a time. I'm actually using a thin wire rather than string because I just think it's that extra security. String can sometimes soften and snap, and I'd rather put the cane in place. So here we are, first one in place. Just give me a nice support, a little bit distance from the glass itself so that the crop can be trained underneath this. Hopefully it won't get too much scorch. I might put some netting on the outside of the greenhouse as we move through summer, just to provide some extra screening from the sun if the weather gets really hot. But on days like this is absolutely fine. Now on to the next one. Just work out where each individual pot is so that the cane is in line with that, and you can take the crop up and over the top. I'm just going to attach it at the top, around those canes there, twist the wire around back round again, double tie, twist, 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 hold it in place. And again, down at the bottom here, just take that round on this cane here. And that will give this tomato a nice bit of extra support. So I'm just going to continue on down the greenhouse now. Each of these has its own support, and then we can tie them in. Now the cucumber has grown up nice and tall. I'm going to take the tip of the shoot round here now, and he's long enough just to start training him up onto this next cane support. Again, I'm going to put the string round the cane and just weave it round. Take the tip of the shoot down, move it across, and just loosely tie the string round the shoot. Don't tighten it too much. We're not trying to crush the stem, just want to support it as it grows. And again, another one in here. Put the string on first. It will slide up and down as it's needed. Move the tip of the shoot round, and just a loose tie here to hold that in place, directing it up onto its support cane. And cucumbers also grow quite a pace during the course of the summer, so every few days this would have grown a few more inches, so I'll just tie the tip of the shoot in. It has got tendrils, it can grip on, and I might well find they've gripped onto the canes, but I think regular training is important, because I've got a little cucumber forming here. Cucumbers are quite a weight when they develop, and if you don't give it regular supports, the weight could snap the stem completely. So just tying that in gently will give it the support it needs to keep it growing through the summer. So there we have it. Everything is trays, everything tied onto the supports. Next thing is to turn the water on from the butt, and that is going to allow water to flow through the pipework into the trays and into the aqua valve system in the base of each tray. I'm going to keep an eye on this now and just watch the water coming in, just to make sure there's no blockages in the pipework, that every valve is working, every tray is filling up with water. Once a certain level of water is in there and the float rises, that will cut the water supply off, and then there will be no more water added to that tray until the plants have used all the water up. So let's have a look. Now my automatic watering system has been running for a few days now. It's been quite hot weather, so it's worth checking. Yes, the water level has now dropped down to about here on the tank, so I'm going to top it up with more water. So do check occasionally through the summer. A tank like this, I found it can, in normal running conditions, last for a good week or so, keeping the plants well watered. But during really extremely hot weather, then maybe the tank is only going to last for 2, 3 or 4 days. So just get your hose, top it up with water to the top, make sure it doesn't run out, and the automatic watering system will do its bit and keep each of those trays that the crops are sitting in well watered. For now, just going to leave this tank to fill up completely with water. It doesn't take long for the cucumbers to get hold, and every few days I train these in to their support canes, just tie them in. This one has already got right up to the top of the greenhouse. I've got lovely flowers developing, and being an all-female variety, it means that at the base of every flower there is a nice little baby cucumber developing. And if we follow this down the stem, well, up a little bit higher, new flowers coming. So in the axis of each of the leaves, you've got a cucumber developing. As we move down, fully open flower, cucumber that's now started forming, come down a little bit more, a little bit bigger, and so I'll have that succession of cucumbers as these ripen up. This will be ripe probably within a couple of weeks, and then a few days later I'll be able to pick this one, and so on. So you've got from one plant just a nice succession of cucumbers growing and developing. The thing I've got to do is to keep that water tank topped up with water, The irrigation pipe takes the water down to the trays. This is making sure that this pot never goes short of moisture. The little aqua valve there just regulating the water that's coming into the tray itself, and that just makes sure that my cucumber plant stays healthy and continues flowering and producing crops right the way through summer. I've just continued training the tip of the cucumber up this supporting cane which runs from the side of the greenhouse here up right up into the apex, and I just loosely tie the stem on every few inches, and the tip is already now right up at the top, so I'll probably just train him along the edge and go sort of horizontally along just to keep the cropping going. But as you can notice from the tip here, we've got some lovely tendrils which will be gripping on, providing support, but it's still worth tying in by hand as well. And as I've mentioned before, every leaf joint up the stem has got a little flower developing, little baby ones right at the tip. Coming down here, you've got some which are just about opening. Here we are, that's one that's just opened on this side here. Down to the bottom here, one nearly ready for picking. So as this one's ripe and ready and large enough, I'll pick it, then I'll have a second, then I'll have a third, and I've got more developing all the way up the stem. And by that way you've got this continuity of flowers, developing fruits, and cucumbers ready for harvest. That will keep going for several months through the summer to keep you supplied in homegrown cucumbers. Now, I grow my crops organically, which means I don't spray with any pesticides of any sort, but there can be some troublesome pests in the greenhouse, particularly a little flying one called whitefly, which can coat the underside of the leaves on your tomatoes, your peppers, your aubergines, your cucumbers. And if you touch the leaves, the little flies fly out in a great big cloud. They lay their eggs on the underside leaves as well. The way I try and control them is to hang up these yellow sticky glue traps. You can buy these from garden centres and mail order suppliers. Be careful, the glue is incredibly sticky, so it will catch your hair. If you had hair, it can be a problem, not too much of a problem for me. But hang these in your greenhouse, and then the colouring itself will attract the flying pests onto it. It can attract other flying pests as well, other sorts of flies, the little black fungus flies you get around the greenhouse as well. So hanging these up among your crops just helps to provide that extra level of protection, attracting some of the flies onto the trap, so that rather than landing on your plants, if they do fly around looking for somewhere new to land and lay their eggs, they'll hopefully find one of these sticky traps. You can put several of them around the greenhouse. I've had this one up here for a few weeks now, and it's already got quite a range of little whitefly and other flies and things on it. It will catch wasps, it will catch other flying insects. The one word of caution I would say is that these traps are incredibly sticky. And I have heard people in the past say if they have small birds visiting their greenhouse, perhaps a wren or something else which gets into the greenhouse, they could be attracted and see the insects on the trap and think that it's food, and they can get stuck on as well. So if you do find that you've got birds in your area that might be venturing into the greenhouse, put some netting over the vents or the doors just to make sure the birds don't come in, and you won't have any problem accidentally catching birds on these traps. So I wouldn't use them around the garden at all. In the greenhouse or conservatory they should be fine, and it's just a different way of trying to control pests without having to spray the crops at all, and I find these are quite effective. Now, as I've said, I make life easy for myself. Cucumbers have a very, very high demand for moisture, so you must make sure they never go short of water. If you've got them in growing bags or pots, then watering must be a very regular daily activity. But I've got mine growing in this AutoPot growing system. Now, I know there's lots of varieties of cucumber you can get, but I do find Bella is an exceptional variety. Just look at the length and size of these fruits. Certainly ready to harvest now. Massive cucumbers, one developing from this leaf node and the next one up. So I've got a couple here now ready for picking. More fruits developing up the stem, and along here another plant of cucumber bella. So you're going to get a really generous crop and hopefully be picking cucumbers over many months through the summer. You can choose other varieties as well, and there's plenty of varieties to pick when it comes to cucumbers, but for its disease resistance, something which is going to make sure that these leaves don't go down with that fungus disease, powdery mildew, then I think Bella is certainly hard to beat. And to make sure your cucumbers last even longer in storage, just wrap them in a little bit of cling film, roll it up and store it like this in the bottom of the fridge, and cucumbers will store much longer, lasting for many days, even a week or so, if they're wrapped to stop them losing moisture. Before I even have my cup of tea, first job of the day is to open up the greenhouse. The sun's coming up and I need to make sure that the temperature doesn't rise too high, so the greenhouse needs ventilation. I'm lucky because I've got double doors at the front, so I can open these up to let the air flow freely. I've also got roof ventilators, some automatic ones which will open when it gets hot and close again when the conditions get cool. So these help to keep the airflow going as well, flowing through the greenhouse. I've got louver vents in the side, so it's going to open up one of these as well. And I've got some louvers in the side, so wherever you've got ventilators in your greenhouse, open up as many as you can on a hot day, because it will just keep the air flowing and keep the conditions much cooler. All I've got to do every week or so is to top up this tank of water. Just literally fill the tank up completely, and the water will just flow from this tank into the trays at the bottom, the green trays. They've got a little float system in them, which as the water fills up, the float raises, turns the water flow off, the plants use the water, the float drops down, and when the water in the tray at the bottom has been used up, it opens up the valve again and fills up and keeps the system self-watering. So I reckon this tank of water here will probably supply the plants here for a really good week, 10 days, sometimes even 2 weeks. But the height of the summer, when the plants are fully grown and it's a really hot day, maybe I've got to top this tank up maybe once a week, but certainly will keep the plants watered every day without me needing to do too much at all. And all I do is add some liquid feed, something like Tomarite or tomato fertilizer, and when I top the tank up with water, literally I add some of this at the same time. So I've got a lovely liquid high potash feed, which is what my crops really want, and that keeps the plants watered and fed automatically. Just takes the daily chore, one of those daily chores off me. Now, something else you can do in the summer to reduce the stress of the hot weather on your plants is to raise the humidity in the greenhouse. And to do that, literally every morning, once I've opened up the vents, is to damp down the greenhouse floor. I just leave a really good layer of moisture all over the floor itself. And this water will gradually evaporate as the temperature rises, and that increased humidity means that there's less stress on the plants themselves. And in addition to damping the floor down, I mist the plants, just wetting all of the leaves. Plants will take up water when the air is dry and the conditions are hot, and that flow of water, that translocation of water, means the plants are taking up the water and food they need. Higher humidity means that the plants don't need so much water at the root. It reduces that stress. So just misting over the plants completely first thing in the morning, I find that water gradually evaporates up, increases the humidity, reduces the stress. The other thing that high humidity does is it reduces the chance of a troublesome greenhouse pest developing. There's a pest called red spider mite. Red spider mite's a tiny little mite. It will crawl over the leaves, feed on the leaves, quite often on the underside of leaves like cucumbers. You'll see mottled patterning, you'll see little webs developing, and it can actually completely devastate crops, particularly things like cucumbers. But red spider mites like a really warm, dry air. So by increasing humidity, by keeping the air moist, you actually reduce the chance of red spider mite developing. I always grow a few cucumbers in a greenhouse, and this has been one of my favourites for several years now. It's a variety called Carmen. It's an all-female cucumber, which means that every flower should form a fruit and you don't get that pollination, which leads to very bitter cucumber flavours. It's a full-size cucumber, and I love it because it's got good disease resistance, particularly against a disease which attacks the leaves of cucumbers called powdery mildew, which kills them off, and you can lose the crop so early in the season if you don't grow a disease resistant variety. So I love Carmen, really decent size cucumbers. They'll get even bigger than this if you leave them a little bit longer, but I pick them when they're a decent size, and it's an absolutely delicious crop. I have though become a convert to little baby cucumbers. I'll show you why. This is a variety called Nimrod. Now in the past I always thought, why grow cucumbers which got little baby fruits when you could grow a cucumber which produces a decent sized fruit? Well, I'll tell you why, because it produces so many of them. As I say, this is a variety called Nimrod. Produces probably at least one fruit at each leaf node as you go up the stem. And I've got here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I've got a dozen fruits already developing on this crop. So it's going to produce masses and masses of these little baby cucumbers. So if, like my family, you like your cucumbers for salads, then I think this is a really, really good variety to choose. Look how generous it is. Got fruits at every single node up, and as soon as these are just like about the length of your hand, these are ready for picking. Beautiful little mini cucumbers, just perfect for a summer salad, and the crops just go on coming. Really generous free cropping variety in Nimrod. Very easy to grow from seed. Sow them around about March time. The earlier the better if you've got a heated propagator. You'll get a crop you can plant out, train up into the eaves of the greenhouse, and give yourself pickings week after week after week. So there you have it. Open up your greenhouse in the morning, damp down the greenhouse floor, give the plants a water, top up the watering tank and reservoirs you've got, check over the plants, see if there's any problems, maybe pick off the side shoots on your tomatoes, train the tips in, and that way you'll keep your crops growing really well through the summer. Don't forget to give them some occasional food as well, particularly flowering, fruiting crops with a high potash fertiliser. There you have it, a really productive greenhouse feeding you and your family. Cucumbers and tomatoes are my favourite greenhouse crops. Grow them alongside one another here in my unheated greenhouse. I have got some shading on the outside of the greenhouse this summer because it's been so hot. Cucumbers are setting really nicely in here, and the main form of the cucumber is that it's trained as a single stem in my greenhouse. As the cucumber plant grows, it produces the one main stem, which here I'm training into a cane support up into the eaves of my greenhouse. So you've got the main stem, you've got side shoots or leaves coming out, and from each node where a leaf comes out you might get 1 or 2 flowers or fruits. Flowers will open first, and these female flowers have got a little baby cucumber already forming at the base, and as the flowers set they'll form little cucumbers. So this is the main form of the cucumber. Growing up, I'm growing this just as one main stem up into the eaves of the greenhouse, and your cucumber plant will also produce these tendrils from the main stem. They'll come out, and these can literally grip on and help to support the plant as it grows. But I wouldn't leave things to chance. I do tend to tie my cucumber plants into their supports very, very regularly as they develop, literally every day or two at the moment, because they're growing so quickly. The tendrils can play their part. The tendrils sort of grow out. Here it is, it's gripping onto the tomato plant alongside it, but I wouldn't rely on these tendrils to hold the plant up, because once the fruits start developing, this weight that you get from big cucumber plants could really pull down, and the weight could pull those tendrils away. So don't leave things to chance. Like here, just tie in with string regularly to make sure you've really supported the cucumber as it grows. The thing with cucumbers is that sometimes they're very generous and they produce more than one main shoot. So you'll find out of that main stem, like I said before, you know, you've got the main stem, the leaf, the flower where the fruit will develop. You get these side shoots developing, and when the side shoots develop, you could just leave a side shoot in place but prune the tip of it off like I have on this one here, so that it's got 2 leaves, but it will also produce some fruits from the side shoot. So you could leave those on. You could pitch them out completely if they've got too many fruits. I've got one here I'm going to pinch out in a second. But if the shoots do get very long and you've just got too much congested growth, then there's something else you can do, and that's to grow a new cucumber plant for free. This can be quite useful to have some plants in reserve, where you've even got plants to give away to friends, and all you've got to do is remove that side shoot and use it as a cutting. So what I'm going to do is to take this and show you how to propagate it. The main stem's coming up, side shoots coming out. We've already got 1 fruit, 1 leaf developing, and I'm going to leave actually just that 1 fruit today. I'm going to cut this shoot off just here, so that all that's leaving on the side shoot is a leaf and 1 fruit, and I'll leave those to develop. Now, any side shoots you remove can be prepared as cuttings, and I just root these in water. Got a couple here which I took 2-3 weeks ago, and literally now they are ready to be potted up, which we can do in a minute. But the cuttings are prepared, and I just push these down into just a jar, a glass, a bottle of water, and you notice how they're rooted. Now, key thing to remember is that the best roots form at one of these nodes where the leaves and the fruits will have developed. You can notice that here, how all the roots are coming out in a nice little group. Notice it on this one as well. The roots are forming here. That's where there was a leaf and tendril and flower buds were attached. So on this particular cutting here, I'm going to cut but just below one of those leaf joints. Just cut that away. Cut off the tendril, cut off the leaf, cut off the little fruit as well. If there's any other fruits developing, I would take these off, because you don't want this extra strain on the plant itself. And I think I will probably take that 1 big leaf off there as well. So that's my cutting formed, and all you've got to do, as I say, is get some water, jar of water or whatever, and pop that into it and just leave it. I put it on my kitchen windowsill, leave that for perhaps 3 weeks or so till it's really well rooted. And once you've got a good root system formed, like you have on this one here, it can be potted up. And all I'll do is get a little pot of compost, put a layer of compost in the bottom, just get my cutting, just need one in the pot, just put that in the pot itself, just lay those roots onto the compost, get some more compost to fill in around, and don't really have to firm it because the compost will settle as you water it down. Fill it up with more compost, and there you have it, a nice new cucumber plant. You can do that with the second one as well. As I say, just a layer of compost in the bottom of the pot. Get your little cutting, roots, just spread the roots out onto the compost there and cover over with some more compost. I'm using a seed and potting compost which has got very little nutrient in it, perfect for cuttings and propagations and planting seeds. Put in there, and then I've got the 2 new ones. I'm just going to water these well, and these will grow into little plants. A couple I did a few weeks ago now here, and these are already growing nice and strongly. The cucumber plant is growing up, it's already producing flowers and fruits, and I'll just tie this plant into its support as it grows. And during the summer, if I need any spare plants or want to give this away to some friends, or my main plants in the greenhouse run out of steam, I can replace it with these. So just remember, your cucumbers are going to need regular watering, feeding with a high potash fertiliser to encourage good flower and fruit production. Train them in as they grow right up to the eaves of the greenhouse. If the plant has reached the limits of the space you've got available, then just pinch out the tip of the shoot completely. And if you want, you can take some cuttings from side shoots, if your cucumbers produce them, to grow some new plants. So by the end of the summer, if I find that the main plant has run out of steam and all the fruits have been produced up it so far and it's not being productive anymore, I could take this plant out and replace it with a new cucumber plant to go on fruiting for a few more weeks into late summer, into the autumn.